Sometimes, in the thrill of the hunt, people forget the true purpose of hunting. Originally, this activity was used exclusively to obtain food, not for entertainment. However, nowadays, for most, it has become a pleasant hobby rather than a heavy and necessary labor. Fortunately, sometimes nature can put forgetful people in their place, as happened in this story. Once, 4 adult men went hunting together. They tried to get out into nature every time the hunting season opened. All of them were very good marksmen, having grown up in rural areas among wild forests. They never cared about what they shot at because they went into nature for fun. They were in search of sustenance and quickly set up their tents. The men took out food and decided to have a snack before the hunt. But suddenly, they felt that someone was watching them. Looking around, they noticed that some creature had stirred in the bushes. The hunters immediately grabbed their guns and rushed after it. The curious observer turned out to be a small wolf cub. Smelling the food, it approached the camp to find something to eat, but the men had no intention of feeding it. They were overcome by the thrill of the hunt. One of them, taking advantage of the fact that the animal had stopped, raised his gun and shot. To the surprise of his companions, the wolf cub jumped aside and ran away. The men continued the chase. When the cub stopped again to catch its breath, they shot at it, and already 4 hunters were aiming. It seemed that the wolf had no chance, but it dodged again, as if enchanted. This happened several times, and when the hunters were finally exhausted, they decided to abandon this futile pursuit and return to camp. However, due to their excitement, they could not find their way back for a long time. About 3 hours later, the men stumbled upon a nearly ruined hut. Seeing it, they even thought about staying there until morning and then continuing their search for their tents at dawn. But unexpectedly, the door of the hut swung open, and a gray-haired old man stepped out onto the crooked porch. Behind him stood the very wolf cub they had been chasing. The old man sternly asked the surprised hunters what they had been shooting at the little cub. In response, they became insolent and said it was none of his business whom they hunted. They even threatened the old man with violence and told him to mind his own business. The elderly man did not argue, he only shook his head with regret and went back inside. As soon as he closed the door behind him, something inexplicable began to happen around them. Suddenly, everything darkened, and although there had been no clouds in the sky before, a heavy downpour started. In a moment, it turned into large hail that beat down leaves and broke branches on the trees. The men did not know where to go. They wanted to hide in the hut, but the wind, which had also arisen suddenly from nowhere, prevented them from even approaching the porch. To avoid falling, the hunters clung to the trees. The hurricane reached such a force that it could lift people into the air. Feeling that they could not hold on much longer, the men began to scream. They called for help from the old man, but due to the loud noise, their cries sounded like mere whispers. Everything ended as quickly as it had begun. The hunters lay on the ground. Their guns had disappeared as if someone had taken them. When they got up and looked around, they were struck by real fear. The unusual hut that had just been before them had vanished as if it had been a mirage. However, mirages rarely come to several people at once, especially identical ones. Therefore, the hunters, in a panic, immediately ran away. This incident evidently frightened those men very much because after that, none of them hunted again. This story left many questions. It remains unknown who that unusual old man was and what exactly caused the strong storm. It is also unclear why the experienced marksman could not hit a stationary target, even though they shot at the same time. Nevertheless, nature managed to punish the audacious hunters for their arrogance and taught them a lesson about hunting defenseless animals.